Welcome back to the channel and another podcast. Paul Peterhead, Scotland recovered addict. I'm really pleased to be joined today by Emily.
Hi, my name is Emily. I am an addict and alcoholic of the recovered variety, and I am joining you today from just outside of Toronto in Canada.
Well, I'm really pleased you've joined us. I so appreciate you taking time out your day to carry this message of freedom and hope and courage. Okay, family, if you're here, perhaps you're new to Cocaine Anonymous, you're looking for sponsorship. We have current male and female sponsorship lists, which we can provide you by WhatsApp. So if that's something you're looking for, feel free to put your first name, your number underneath wherever you see this broadcast posted, and we will get back to you. There's also a host of resources, ebooks we can send you on WhatsApp. And there's also some very healthy WhatsApp groups we can add you to where there's dozens of things posted about recovery every single day. Amongst the thousands of good YouTube channels to support you in your life and recovery, this particular channel has got many great podcasts. It's probably got 2 dozen personal stories like this one, and there's also podcasts in each of the steps. There's 2 on step 1 and 2 on step 2. There's also the Spiritual Malady, the ABCs of addiction, the entire cycle change, podcasts on the traditions. Yeah, so feel free to check out the other broadcasts, like and subscribe and share. Bear in mind you can pause, rewind this podcast and come back to it at any given point. So with all that being said, it gives me great pleasure to mute and hand over to Emily. Over to you, my friend.
Thank you again so much, Paul, for having me today. I'm really excited to be here with you. Like I said before, my name is Emily, and I am a drug addict and an alcoholic, and I have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, seemingly. So, our book on page 58, it says our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. So, I will get right to doing that. I'm 26 years old right now. I was born in 1998. I got sober when I was 24. I came into the rooms when I was 22, and I usually don't share much about what my childhood was like. And I have a reason for that. So I'll tell you a little bit. I was raised, in a pretty normal household. I mean, I had lots of my own problems, and I had a certain number of traumatic experiences in my lifetime, but none of those things make me a drug addict. And I think that's a really important point in my life to experience and know for myself, is that I am not a drug addict because of the trauma I have or the experience of abuse that I went through. I'm a drug addict and an alcoholic because when I put drugs and alcohol into my body, I have an adverse reaction to those things and I have an allergy. And when I'm not using drugs and alcohol, I have an obsession of the mind that tells me constantly that I should be using drugs and alcohol, even when it's blowing my life to pieces. So I actually only very recently remembered this. I was listening to someone share in a meeting, and um, I've shared for quite some time about my first experience with alcohol. And it turns out that's actually not my first experience with alcohol. Someone brought up a new memory for me where I was in the eighth grade and I was at a friend's house, and his mom had a box of wine sitting on the counter. And I was alone in the house. My friends were outside playing in like the pool, and I was inside getting a water for myself. And I saw this box of wine, and I remember thinking, like, how am I supposed to not drink this right now? I grew up in a home where there was no drugs and alcohol. My mom hasn't had a drink in, well, I'm 26, so 25 years, because she doesn't like the way it makes her feel. How crazy is that? I can't imagine that, um, personally, at least. And I remember looking at it and feeling like, my body was on fire, trying to tell myself I should not be drinking this. Like, and if this is what high school is going to be like, if I'm at friends' houses or parties and there's alcohol, I don't know how I'm going to say no to this. And I remember thinking, like, I don't know what I'm going to do here. But I walked away and it was fine. I had never drank before. I was 13 at the time, but that was my first experience with alcohol. And looking back now, knowing what my life became and is for me now as an alcoholic, it's so crazy to think that that thinking, that kind of feelings toward alcohol was always present in my life well before my first drink. I didn't take my first drink until I was 16, 3 years after that. But when I had my first drink, I remember like I was having a party with some friends who were living across the street from me at the time, and we got really drunk on her mom's coolers, and I remember feeling like I could do exactly what I wanted to do and react in the ways I wanted to react, and feel like I wanted to feel for the first time. And nobody was going to judge me for that because, well, I was drunk. And I could put off all of the inappropriate comments that I made and, crazy ways I acted and behaved on, well, I was drunk. And I could exist exactly as the person I wanted to, and no one was going to say anything about it except, wow, you were really drunk. And I loved that. I really enjoyed that feeling of like release. It gave me something that I had never had that I really wanted to have. And I knew right away that that was going to be my thing. So I went to university. And when I was in university, I I was living in residence, and I was on the second floor of the building. And it's a very nonsensical detail, but I just remember it so well. And there was a guy who lived down the hall from me, and he was a year older than I was. And in Canada, the legal drinking age, or at least in Ontario where I live, the legal drinking age here is it's 19, and I was 18 at the time. And this guy, I would give him money that I had to take the bus. So my mom would give me $2 coins to take the bus. We call them toonies here in Canada. My mom would give them to me so that I could go and I could experience life in Toronto. I had just moved away from home, and she wanted me to go live my best life. And I would give these toonies to the boy down the hall so he could go to the liquor store and buy me bottles of wine every week. And once a week became twice a week, and twice a week became 3 times a week. And you get the idea. And I remember my mom calling me and saying to me, how are you going through this much money taking the bus? Where are you going? I remember saying to my mom, Mom, I am going places. I'm going places. And it's hilarious to think now that those places that was going was straight into alcoholism, and a very bad drinking habit. So I went into my second year, and I was living in a house with 6 other women, and it was an experience. I'll say that it was an experience for sure. But one night I was drinking a bottle of vodka by myself, sitting at the kitchen table. And when I went upstairs to use the washroom and came back down, a couple of my other roommates were standing around the table, and my bottle was gone. And they said to me, Emily, we're worried about your drinking. And we think you've had enough tonight. And how dare they? I remember that thought of like, how dare they judge what I do and how much I drink. And I looked at the girl who was talking to me, and I said, if you don't give me back my alcohol, I will break your face. And that's not a fun threat. Um, it probably didn't have any real, anger behind it of like actual willingness to punch her, but there was a lot of like real resentment, like how dare you speak to me like that? Because I was the most important person, right? They were worried about me and my well-being and my well-being in the home, but I was more worried about whether or not I was going to be able to get my alcohol back so that I could get my peace and ease that I really wanted, right? Because at the end of the day, when I think about it, what I really wanted from drugs and alcohol was ease and comfort. I wanted to feel okay in my own body and my own skin. And I didn't feel that when I was sober. Shortly after that, we switched to smoking pot instead of drinking because my drinking had started to get me in a lot of trouble, especially with my boyfriend at the time. His family didn't like me because I would show up to all their family events really drunk. I would make a fool of myself. I was not very kind, especially when I was drinking. And so I decided I was going to start smoking weed instead. And very quickly, it became a daily habit. Um, at first, it was just because it was fun and it was comfortable, and I could do things without forgetting what I was doing or blacking out or, any of those kinds of experiences, but I could still feel okay in my skin. And then it became, well, I can't go to the grocery store without smoking weed because, it's uncomfortable to be around all these people. And whatever it was I could come up with and tell myself as a reason to be smoking pot before I did anything. And then it was the second I woke up in the morning because I woke up nauseous. And right before I went to bed because, well, I couldn't sleep without it. And every minute of every day I was smoking weed, and I liked that. I liked the idea that I was like a stoner. I wanted to like live in that. At that point, I dropped out of university. My mental health was getting significantly worse. Not that I correlated my drug and alcohol use to my worsening mental health, because that couldn't be possible because the drugs and alcohol were me self-medicating that. And that's what I told myself. I told myself a whole lot of lies. And I lived in this experience of myself telling me like these lies, and I believed them. I believed all of the lies that I told myself constantly. And, at that point, I decided to go back to school again, and I got an education, and I did complete it. I did complete a small diploma in horticulture science. I really love it. I think it was a great experience for me. Um, and then I got into the workforce and I went into my field. And generally speaking, people with educations in horticulture science, which is plant science, go into landscaping. So I went into landscaping, and keep in mind that, I had stopped drinking almost completely. I barely drank. But when I went into this field, there was a pretty popular culture of drinking after work. And it might not be like that in all places. But at my work, it definitely was, where we would sit down at the end of the day and have a couple of drinks. There was a liquor store in the same lot where our trucks were. And very quickly for me, that became everything I looked forward to. I looked forward to the end of the day when I could get drunk with my coworkers. Um, And there were some days that, nobody wanted to drink. Everyone just wanted to go home. So I was buying alcohol for my coworkers to try and convince them and manipulate them into getting drunk with me every day. And then I stopped making it home. I had a partner, we lived together, and there were some nights when I, promised that I was going to be home to start dinner and do laundry and show up as a girlfriend, as a person living in this household. And I wasn't. I was usually at the bar or, in the yard getting drunk with my friends, my colleagues. There were nights when if I did make it home, my partner would come up in the morning and find me passed out drunk in my car because I made it home, maybe, but I couldn't open the door to come inside the house. And eventually he decided to leave me. He had had enough. I was a walking tornado. Everywhere I went, I was insane. I was constantly drunk. Um, so I took some time off of work and I decided to move home with my parents. It only lasted 3 weeks before they had had enough of me and my drinking as well. And this was like height of COVID. It was the winter, the end of 2020 going into 2021. And I made the decision that I was going to move into a shelter because I didn't feel like I had anywhere else to go. Um, I moved into a youth shelter because I was 22 at the time. And that's where everything kind of hit the fan for me very quickly. I tried acid for the first time in mid-January of 2021. And within 6 weeks, I had decided that I was going to start smoking crystal meth. Within a week or two of that, I was smoking crack cocaine. Within a month or two of that, I was doing heroin. Um, I got kicked out of the shelter that I was living in. I started living in my car. When I lost my car, I was living in a tent in a park. Um, I was going to any lengths to get high because everything that I had wrapped around myself, the life that I had created, was so horrible to live that I couldn't bear doing it sober. And so I started prostituting because, I didn't have enough money to keep up this habit. I lost my job and I didn't know what to do. There's this part of the book that we're looking at here. It says most of us have been unwilling to admit that we're real alcoholics. I knew that I was a real drug addict. There was no point in my drinking or using where I really thought to myself, wow, the way I smoke crystal meth is normal. The way I smoke crack is normal, because it definitely was not. Um, what I was unwilling to admit was that I couldn't stop myself. So a couple months after I had started using, I started going to meetings. I had a friend who was a member of a different 12-step fellowship, and she showed me that they existed and that there was freedom, but I didn't know anything about that freedom. I didn't know anything about it whatsoever. And I decided to go to rehab. So I went to rehab for the first time, and I thought, okay, I'm going to get better, and then I'll come out and I'll be okay. What I didn't know was that when I walked out of the doors of treatment for the first time was the day that the real work was really going to start for me. I didn't realize that I had a disease, that there was something wrong with my mind and the way that I thought and the way that I looked at life. And I didn't know any of those things. I just knew and believed that I could go to rehab, that I would come out, and that I was going to be okay. And I would just never smoke crack again. And that was okay. And that was absolutely not the case whatsoever. Within 3 weeks of leaving treatment, I was smoking crack again, and my life had upended itself. And that continued for another 6 months before I went to treatment again. Significantly worsening as the days went on. Um, the choices I was making were getting scarier and scarier. The places I was showing up in and, the things I was doing to get high were more and more concerning. So I went to treatment again and I got out. And I love telling this story. There's a story in our book about a guy, I think his name is Fred. I could be wrong, but I believe that's who it is. And he decides he's going to put a shot of whiskey in his milk because, well, it can't hurt him on a full stomach, and it's going to be okay because it's in milk. And I thought that was so ridiculous, right? I couldn't imagine putting a shot of whiskey in a glass of milk and thinking that that was okay. And then I got out of treatment and I was hanging out with one of my friends from sober living because I had moved into sober living at that point. And she said, we should go to the club. We should go dancing. I said, that sounds like a wonderful idea. Yes, I was having a great day, much like this story we're looking at here. And then suddenly the thought crossed my mind that if I were to put a shot of vodka into the ginger beer I was drinking, it would be okay because I mean, it's just a ginger beer. It's just whatever you call it, a Moscow Mule. And it's just one, and it couldn't hurt me if it was just one. And as soon as I felt the alcohol take over my body, I needed another one, and then another, and then another. And then we left that club and we went to a bar down the street. And then we showed up back at our sober living house 2.5 hours late for our curfew. And they had demanded a drug and alcohol test from us. And we both started to cry because we knew what we had done. And they said, okay, well, you can stay the night. But in the morning you have to go and we will reassess your treatment plan after you've sobered up. And I decided in my drunken wisdom that I was gonna just leave from then because I'm gonna have to leave in the morning anyways. So when I left, I decided that I was gonna go down the street and I was going to get another shot, and then I would go to my friend's house and I would be okay. And on my way to my friend's house, something happened as I was walking across the street from getting out of my taxi to the front of his apartment building. A man stopped me, and this area is very known for people who use crack cocaine. And a man stopped me and said, "Hey, you're really pretty. Do you want to smoke some crack with me?" And I said, "Absolutely, I do." And I never showed up at my friend's house. And he spent the entire night worrying about me. And around 4 o'clock that morning, I took a hit. I took a hit of crack cocaine that had, it was full of fentanyl. And I hit the ground. And I came to with these paramedics standing over me, telling me what had happened, that they had had to Narcan me 4 times and do CPR. And I was lucky to be alive. And they said, "We need to take you to the hospital." And my first thought was, I just really need another hit of crack. And that was August of 2022, where I started my last relapse. Lasted me 12 whole weeks. I decided I was going to give up on the program and trying to get sober because this was just my life now. Because nothing I could do was gonna make me be the person I wanted to be. I could never feel comfortable in my own skin. Sobriety felt like my whole body was on fire all the time. Sobriety was awful and uncomfortable, and I just didn't want it. And I figured I would just use until I died. And that was my best idea, to just use until the day I died. I watched my best friend die of this disease about a year before I got sober. I've watched 12 of my very good friends die while I have been sober because of this disease. It's heartbreaking. And while I was out in those last 12 weeks, I couldn't tell you what happened. I barely remember them. But I can tell you what happened right at the end. There was a woman in CA. Her name's Kelly. She's still around. She's a wonderful, wonderful human being. And I called her one day and I said, "I just can't take it. I can't stand life sober. I can't stand life using. I don't know what else to do." And she told me that I should go to a meeting and get a book, and that once I've done that, that I should take myself to detox. And I laughed. I had been to detox 18 times prior in the last year. And she said, "I don't know, dude. This is what I suggest. Take it or don't." And I said, "Okay." So I went to a meeting that night. It was November 3rd of 2022. I went to a meeting, and I remember I picked up off of my floor whatever I could that smelled the cleanest. It was horrible. I went to a meeting and I picked up a big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's the same book that I still use. This book is absolutely falling to pieces, but it's the book that I still use. It's the only one I have right now. And I got this book. And I called her after. I said, "Okay, I got a book. Now what?" And she said, "Okay, now go to detox." And it took me 2 days to get there. But I went on November the 5th. I went to detox. And I remember I was sitting outside of this detox center. It was early in the day. It was probably 8 o'clock in the morning. I had been up all night. And I sat down on the front porch of this detox center and uh, I watched the day of Toronto start. Toronto's a very busy city, and I watched this day unfold in front of me. People walking their dogs and getting ready for work and heading out in different directions, going to see different people. And I remember feeling like I had never been more alone in my life. Like this world was going on without me, that I didn't have a place and that I didn't fit in anywhere, and that I could just fade away and nobody would notice that I was gone. And I had never felt more isolated and separated and lonely than in that moment. It was a horrible feeling, and I had never felt more terrified. So I decided that I was going to go to the detox. And I went in, and then on the 7th of November, after having been there for 2 days, I decided that I was going to drink. I went to the liquor store and I smuggled a bottle of vodka into the detox. And I drank until I threw up. And I didn't get drunk. And I went to bed. And then the next day, when I called that woman Kelly, we started to go through this book together, line by line, page by page. And we talked about it. And she showed me just how she experienced this book, just how these words came true just for her. Like it was almost written just about herself. And then I got to have that experience just like she did. So I started going through the steps. And at 10 days of sobriety, I was back at home. I was living in a harm reduction house. If you don't know what that is, it's basically a house where you are supposed to use safely. Not really sure what that looks like or how that works, but that's what the idea of it is. So I was living in a harm reduction house where other people were using drugs and drinking. And I lived there for the first 6 months of my sobriety. And during that time, so it was 10 days. That's where I left off. My apologies. My brain goes a couple different ways sometimes and I get overexcited. But at this 10-day mark, I was sitting at home and I was sitting in my bed. And it was 1 o'clock in the morning. And I thought, like, wow, I'm going to go get high right now. There's nothing I can do to stop myself because everything, that obsession was so real for me. Everything in my body said, you need to go get high. I felt like I was on fire. My bones ached. It's all I wanted. And then I had a pause and I thought, well, I could just end my life because I am, destroying the lives of the people that I love. I'm destroying my own life. And then I don't have another in me. I'm going to die. So I might as well just end it right here and I can go out while I'm sober. And the thing about the fact that I had been hanging around the rooms like a revolving door for the year prior to that was that I picked up a couple of things. And one of the things that I picked up that was rolling around in my brain was this relationship with God that I didn't want to experience, that I didn't understand. I didn't understand how God was going to work in my life. But in that moment, this third and final thought showed up in my mind. And it said, well, the one thing you haven't tried doing is giving up. You've tried all the other things, but you haven't tried just getting on your knees and being willing to give it up. And I realized that I couldn't do it. I, myself, Emily, cannot stop myself from getting drunk or high today. There is no magical cure for that. So I got on my knees and I remember crying out into the void and saying, I don't know who you are or what you are, or even if you're there, but if you are there, I want you to know that I am powerless and that there is nothing I can do and that it's so unmanageable to live this life that I am living. And that burning feeling inside of my body and the aching of my bones and the screaming between my ears, it all faded away. Right then and there, I had the most incredible spiritual experience I think I will ever have. And God offered me real ease and comfort for the first time in my life, in my own skin. And I got back into bed and I called Kelly and I said to her, Kelly, I don't want you to commit me to an insane asylum right now, but I need to tell you what just happened to me. And I shared with her what had happened. And she said, Emily, in the time I've been here in these rooms and been sober, I still can't tell you what God is or what God looks like. But I can tell you what God feels like. And that's all I need to know. And so today, when I share with you, I can tell you exactly the same thing. So I don't know what God is or what God looks like, but I know what God feels like. I know what it feels like to have the obsession to smoke crack cocaine and inject crystal meth and snort heroin and take a drink and all of these crazy things that I was doing. I know what it is like to have those things removed from me. The obsession to do those things is gone. And that is a direct result of being willing to take steps 1, 2, and 3. So I continued going through the book with Kelly's, and we started looking at those other steps. Step 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Where is it here? I'm just looking at the steps in my own book here. So I had put the foundation in place. I had admitted that I on my own could not do this. That drugs and alcohol were ruling my life. And that I couldn't do anything. Everything was unmanageable when I was sober and when I was using. Then in that moment, I had fixed a cornerstone. I was open-minded enough, just enough, to say, okay, maybe there could be a God. And that's really all that step 2 meant to me at the time. And still, honestly, really all it means to me today is I came to believe that there was something that could, help me not smoke crack today, that would help me make a sane and normal decision, because nothing about smoking crack is sane or normal. And I made that decision to let that power take care of me today. And thus, I had the faith, I had hope, and I was honest for the first time. Honesty was a hard come by thought for me. I didn't know anything about what it meant to be honest. Everything I had created around myself was a lie, and I didn't know how to be honest with myself, let alone with other people. But in that moment, I became willing to be honest. It was the first honest thing I had ever said to myself. So I sat down and I looked at step 4. And step 4 was scary. A lot of people have a lot of fear and struggles around step 4. And I understand those things, but this is a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. We're taking stock. It's fact finding and fact facing. These are things that I have already done. Now I just need to face them. I can never get better from a point of which I am unwilling to look at. So when I'm doing my step 4, the only thing I'm doing is rigorously being honest and courageous about the person that I have been. It's okay. My sponsor was that too. And the women who came before her were just like that too. And my friends in these rooms, they were that too. So I made the decision that I was going to sit down and write all of these things out that I had been and done, and the people that I had hurt, and the fears and angers that I had, and look at them. Truthfully look at all of them, every last one, even the ones I promised I was going to take to the grave. Because nothing surprised my sponsor. The woman I told in step 5 all of these things to looked at me at the end and said, "You think you're special? I've been through them all too. I've done all the same things you have. You don't need to worry." So when I did step 5, I had swallowed some real bits of truth about myself. It says that in the book. Then I went home and I took step 6 and 7, because in step 4 and 5, I found these things that were objectionable about myself. These things about myself that I didn't like, that weren't good qualities that I had. Some pretty crappy qualities. I had defects and I still have shortcomings. But I was willing to let God take those things away from me. And some of them still exist and they come back. But that's why I have step 10. We're not quite there. Step 8 and 9. I had made the list of these people I had hurt in step 4. And step 8 for me was really just becoming willing and in prayer, finding the courage and the humility to look at those things, the people that I had hurt and the things I had done that were wrong. So in step 9, and I'm still working on step 9, I will always be working on step 9. I started to make amends. This was a real action step for me, going out and really sitting down with the people that I had hurt and making financial amends and um, living amends. And there was only one amends of all the amends I have made to date that went really sour. And I remember I called Kelly, I called my sponsor, I said to her, this is what she said to me, and I can't stop crying. It feels horrible. I hate all of the things that I'm feeling right now. What do I do? And Kelly said to me, I don't know why God would have this of you right now, but he would. Trust that. And thank God I had a solid 1 through 8 before I made that amends because I needed reliance on God to get through that. And today I can look back and tell you exactly why God would have that of me. Because now I get to be a sponsor who can tell other women that you can do these things and stay sober, that there are real purpose to these things, and that you don't have to drink or use because of hard days or emotions or people saying shitty things to you or people telling you the truth about the person that you have been. Because 90% of the things that person said to me during that amends were just true things about the person I had shown up as in her life. As hard as it is to hear, it's the truth. Step 10 is an awesome step. I've heard it said like this. Step 10 is steps 3 or 4 through 9 every single day. That's all it is. Continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. That is the accumulation of those steps in my every single day life. Because if you thought that working the steps once was going to be it, that's not. When I came here, I really thought I would work the steps once and then be cured and could go on my life. Step 10 is that I work these steps every single day. But that's okay. It's not scary because this isn't just, a program that I do one time. This is a new way of living. The way of living I had before was horrifying at best. I found this new way of life that is infinitely more useful and peaceful and wonderful every day. It's not always easy. It's not always sunshine and rainbows, but it is a beautiful one in comparison by far. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve my conscious contact with God, as I understand Him, praying only for knowledge of what God would have me do and the power to do that. I pray and meditate every single day. I have to, or else I'm nuts. I am a drug addict. I always have been, and I always will be. But I can ease the insanity of that through prayer and meditation. Every person, it looks different too. I know people who really like walking meditations. I know people who sit and like chant Om and that's their jam. I have different ways of praying and meditating every day. Sometimes I pray the rosary. I'm not Catholic. My family was Catholic, but I'm certainly not. I have lots of personal opinions that through prayer and meditation I get to let go of, which is why I choose to pray the rosary. Sometimes I pray on my knees. Sometimes I pray in bed. Sometimes I pray in the garden. However I get connected to God is the best way for me to get connected to God. And I will tell any of my sponsees that. I'll tell any person who walks in the door that. Find your way to get connected and then do that. Doesn't matter how, it just matters that you are. And finally, I got to step 12. And step 12 says, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. That is the result of working all 12 steps, is having had a spiritual awakening. I am currently aware of God's presence in my life. That's the point. It's the point of all the steps. These steps aren't here so that I don't smoke crack cocaine. They aren't here to keep me from smoking drugs today. They are here to get me connected to a power, to have a spiritual awakening to this power. That is what keeps me sober. The power. Because I have no power over drugs and alcohol. None, absolutely none. Even to this day, still, I truly believe that I don't have choice. I don't have the power of choice over drugs and alcohol. I have the power to choose whether or not I'm going to get connected to God, and God will keep me sober. I believe that. We tried to carry this message to addicts and alcoholics. The message is of hope. The message that I don't have to smoke crack or drink or use drugs or do any of those crazy things today. I do not have to do that today. I don't ever have to do it again so long as I stay on this path. And to practice these principles in all of our affairs, the principles being honesty, open-mindedness, faith, courage, integrity, willingness, humility, love, action, perseverance, spiritual awareness, and service. I love being of service. Being of service means for me showing up for other people when I can't show up for myself. It means making sure that, the 10-person Wednesday night church basement meeting goes on for the next person who needs it. There will always be people walking in these rooms the same way I did, ready to die, full of despair, of ever finding hope. And I absolutely believe that I need to continue to show up for those people. Just because I have recovered from that hopeless place I lived in before doesn't mean that I can't go back. So I keep doing the things that will keep me away from that hopeless place just for today. The only thing I would like to leave you with is the thought that if you don't have a sponsor, you need one. I tried this program on my own many times. It did not work. I know countless other people who have done the same thing, and it did not work. You need a sponsor. Get one. Do the steps fully with all of the earnestness and honesty that you can physically muster within yourself. Get a sponsor, do the steps, and be of service. Show other people that it works, because it does. I was ready to die, and I don't have to today. And that is a gift of my recovery. I get to be a good partner, good daughter, a good friend, a good sponsor, and a good sponsee to the best of my ability every day. Thank God for that. And so I think I'll leave it there. I really appreciate you asking me to be here today, Paul. Thank you again so much.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That was a beautiful share. I was with you all the way. Yeah, the progression of the illness is a progressive fatal illness. The statistics are terrifying in this world of 8,000 million. I think it's every 6 or 7 seconds someone dies of addiction. It is progressive and fatal. The good news is recovery is possible at any point, and yeah, I so appreciate you. So much identification, particularly with the progression of the illness. You mentioned about how, I think you said you started with alcohol, and then there was a progression, and think, if I remember rightly, it was weed, and then it was crack, crystal meth, then crack, and then intravenous, and it progressed to heroin. So a lot of identification in what you shared, and how subtle it is, and how it happens so quickly, or can happen so quickly. And before we know it, as we both know, once you're on the brown stuff for a few days, you're facing pain if you want to get off it. You know that you've got that pain, and most of us don't like pain. And so the tendency is that first one or then for a few days can last months and sometimes years. It's a hideous thing, and I've spent many mornings quite ill, or if I got captured, in the supply game and being withdrawing, in the cells, very painful, very unpleasant, and I often ponder, particularly alcoholics and heroin addicts, they know the phenomena of craving somewhat uniquely amongst all the different substances, deep suffering very often, and not to diminish anyone else's experience with the substances, but certainly sobriety is a commitment and it's a lifestyle. And that was such a beautiful share, very, very powerful share. I so appreciate you taking the time today to come and share with us. So, yeah, a bit of due diligence. There's lots of meetings, folks. There's hundreds of Zoom meetings on right now where you can meet beautiful people like Emily sharing their experience, their strength, their hope, their freedom, their courage, their journey of sobriety, their journey to a new lifestyle. On the screen, you can take a screenshot of this. All those meetings are on every single day. There are about, I think there's over 16 different 24-hour marathon meetings on that are permanently on all day, every day, all week, all year. There's over 16 of them now. And there's a couple of them on that screen there. So stay connected. Connection is protection, and it's a common solution that we harmoniously agree on. And I love what you shared about the variety of prayer and meditation as well, because it's so important to have that variety, I think. I've known people get stale in this process, and get narrow-minded and almost cultic with it, where they can become oppressive. Oh, it has to be like this. No, it doesn't have to be like that. I can, we're adults, it's not a mind control cult. We're free to develop this manner of living. We're free to choose what meetings we attend, how and when and for how often we meditate, how and when and what we pray. And there's such variety now, particularly with the wonder of YouTube and WhatsApp and all the different books and podcasts that are available. There's so much out there to enhance life and circumstances, and I don't miss that lifestyle at all. So, just in a very general way, Emily, with the progression of the illness, did you relatively quickly experience freedom from the obsession to use, or was that something that came over a period of time?
I think it's been both. The obsession to use was lifted from me in that spiritual experience and in the first 2 weeks of my sobriety. And it's never come back in the way that it used to exist. But I believe that as a drug addict and alcoholic, I'm always going to have that the first thought that says, hey, this is uncomfortable. Why not take a drink? And that thought has certainly come back. And it's been a learning experience of how do I get connected to God? How do I get connected to my fellows to have this thought removed? And usually the second thought very quickly after is absolutely not. How am I gonna, get rid of this? And it eases very, very quickly for me today, um, through lots of hard work. But it comes and it goes. But the obsession, that fire in my bones feeling was lifted early in my sobriety, thank God.
Absolutely. And, you make some interesting points there because I've often pondered that, with my own experience. God's my witness. I can't remember the last time I've had a thought to acquire, to my knowledge. It's been quite a while to acquire substances. But there's the fleeting thought, then there's the lingering thought, then there's the obsession, then there's the I'm getting my coat on. There's different stages to it. and I think it is important to understand that, because once we go through the steps and we get a bit of emotional and mental healing and freedom, you know, then the next thing is to grow in understanding and effectiveness, which you clearly have with the way you articulate your message. And then the next thing is understanding things like this, because it could save someone's life, or God through you could save someone's life, because this is a life or death errand. I really believe that. I take sobriety seriously. I really do. And growing in understanding and effectiveness, and this business of the mental state that precedes a relapse into drinking or drugging is the crux of the problem. In the book, the first 40, our program is the first 164 pages of Alcoholics Anonymous, often called the Big Book. But there's another 400 pages after that that are wonderful personal stories of freedom and hope and courage. But of that 164, the first quarter, the first 43 pages, is largely about the first step. But it's not all cut and dried black and white, because if you read those 43 pages, there are elements of step 2 and step 3 in Bill's process of coming to believe and being willing to commit to sobriety. So I very much enjoy those pages, and God gave Will some great wisdom in putting them together. So what's your experience been of reading the book? What would be the favourite part of the big book for you?
That's such a funny question to ask, in the way that, when my sponsor was taking me through the book, every couple of paragraphs, she would say to me, "This is my favorite part of the book." I'd say, "Well, you said that 3 paragraphs ago, Kelly." And now, as a sponsor, I've come to realize that there are so many good parts of this book. Like, everything is my favorite part. You've got the 9th step promises here on the screen, and they're so beautiful. The step 9 and step 10 promises are probably one of my favorites, just because they really highlight the beauty of coming out the other side in sobriety and in recovery. The idea that I would comprehend the idea of serenity and that I would know peace, like I would be at peace within myself, that was a really difficult idea. I didn't think that was possible, but there was hope in these promises that I could have this too. And I think that's a really wonderful part of the book. I mean, there's just so much good stuff. I've been through this book so many times between the first time I went through it with my sponsor and, the countless women that I've taken through this book. And I get new things out of it every time. I get new favorite parts. I get new spiritual experiences with these words. So trying to find a favorite part, it's not possible, but there's many great parts for sure.
Thank you. That was a really good answer. Yeah, absolutely. And the thing about, the reason why the program works so well is because it brings together the best of various elements: psychiatry, medicine, faith groups, and peer-to-peer support. Of course, we now have literature and meetings and steps. And so that's why it works so well, and Zoom, and podcasts, etc. And so it's a holistic program. And the best of the medical estimation is that entire abstinence is the only solution that's going to work for us. The best of psychiatry is that we have to have an ongoing vital spiritual experience. The best of the faith groups say it's a personal relationship with your creator. Yeah, a personal relationship. And then you've got peer-to-peer support, people that are in a similar process of practicing this common solution. And then you've also got the added strength of people like you and me that work with others on a regular basis in this process. So you've got that ongoing experience, and more is revealed. So, it's a wonderful thing. I myself love the doctor's opinion. I think it's masterly. He begins by talking about how the basis of the fellowship. He doesn't mention the steps or the literature. He says is a recovered alcoholic sharing their new conceptions of recovery with another alcoholic. That's the basis of the fellowship. And then he goes on to talk about entire abstinence and how someone that seems doomed, once they've had an entire cycle change, they're easily able to control their urges to drink and drug. And I love how it works. When someone's picked up again, I often go back to page 58, how it works. And we'll read that about how it's okay to grasp the program, but the question is, how am I developing the program on a day-to-day basis? That's really where it's at. How am I developing this lifestyle, and then I had on the screen earlier a vision for you, like people who escaped shipwreck and the camaraderie and fellowship. So yeah, I love the big book too, but I so appreciate you coming along today. I know it's lunchtime where you are there. It's what we from the north of England would call tea time here, which the posh people would call dinner time. So it's sausage and mash for me, and it's nearly ready. But I'd like to invite you to come and talk for a minute or two if you wish. Any last thoughts you'd like to share with our audience?
I mean, oh wow. Thank you again, Paul, for asking me to be here. It's been an absolute pleasure to get to share my experience and chat a little bit of the big book with you. Yeah, I mean, the doctor's opinion, I think it was the most important part when I first got here because it helped me qualify myself. It helped me realize that I had this thing, this disease that they were talking about. Um, and they're very right in saying, nobody could help me the way another drug addict and alcoholic could help me, especially because of my own ego, but that's a whole other thing. Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure. I've been sober since the 8th of November of 2022. I'm coming up on 2 years very soon, provided that I continue to do the work. A lot of people will say, God willing, but I know God wills it. It's up to me to keep putting in the daily reprieve, the daily work that I know to do so that I can get there one day at a time. So with that, I will thank you again. And yeah, it's just about lunchtime for me here. So
Excellent. Thank you so much. Yeah, if we take care of what's right, God will take care of what's left. Uh, so appreciate you, Emily. Okay, family, stay strong in the solution. Check out the other podcasts, Safe and Strong, Moral and Prudent. We do recover. It is a lifestyle and it is a commitment. Thanks very much, Emily. You have a wonderful day, my friend.
thank you, Paul, you as well.
Sure.